planning a 3-week trip through Singapore and Thailand with 3 kids is ambitious enough. But Gretchen and her husband didn't just make it happen for their family of 5. They found 5 business class award seats in both directions, stayed almost entirely using points, certificates, and travel credits, and built an itinerary that their kids could actually enjoy without running everyone into the ground. It took nearly 2 years of planning, around 1 million points, 7 flights, 6 hotels, and somehow almost everything went exactly as planned. Almost. Because months after booking their Singapore Airlines flight, they discovered that the person who had helped ticket their award wasn't actually working for Singapore Airlines, and they had unknowingly paid thousands of dollars to a company posing as the airline. So today, Gretchen shares how she pulled off an incredible family trip to Asia, what she learned about traveling internationally with 3 kids, and the booking scam every traveler needs to know about. Welcome to the BoldlyGo Podcast. I'm your host, DeAndre Coke. I have a guest I am really excited to introduce to all of you all today. But before we introduce her, a few housekeeping reminders as always. For those that listen to our episodes in the audio format, you can catch all these episodes in their entirety on our YouTube channel. And for those of you that watch on YouTube, don't forget you are missing about half the show because every Friday we release our quick hits. That is our up-to-date news in the world of points and miles. All the things you're going to want to know, all the updates over the past week is set out for you in those episodes, and that's only on our audio-only platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those different things. And don't forget, we do have timestamps so you can move ahead or back if you want to save this podcast, bookmark it, because I know our guest is going to talk about some really cool things around family travel that you're going to want to come back to. You can use the timestamps to help you do that. And wherever you're watching or listening to this, please don't forget to leave a like, a rating, subscribe. We love a review, a 5-star rating, and a review, and all those things as well. And so today's guest is Gretchen. And Gretchen, I'm so excited to have you on the show because you wrote on our blog, our contributor blog, you did a post about taking your family to Singapore and Thailand and the incredible story. And you posted that to a contributor post. It went out in our newsletter, and immediately in our WhatsApp community chat, people were like, oh my God, this is such a great story. This is so helpful. This is so great. So I was like, we have to absolutely have you on the show. So Gretchen, welcome to this podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, DeAndre. I'm excited to be here today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Gretchen, before we get into this incredible family trip that I know you worked a considerable amount of time on planning, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? You know, where do you live? What do you do for a living? And then we'll get into how do we even get into points and miles, of course.
Yeah, sure. So I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I also teach group fitness classes at the local YMCA. And then travel planning is definitely my second part-time job.
Absolutely love that. And I know we had another individual that is, I think, an executive director of a YMCA a little farther south than you as well. So you're the second person, at least that I know of, that does work with the YMCA on the show. So can you tell us, before you plan this trip, what got you into points and miles, and what's your points and miles experience? Because I think this is going to be a really unique thing to share, because obviously this is a pretty ambitious trip. So I'm assuming you've been in the points and miles world for a decade or so, right?
Oh, not quite that long. We got into the journey in about 2021. My husband and I listened to a podcast just like on a road trip that they interviewed the points guy, Brian Kelly. So he kind of opened our eyes to points and miles. And I would definitely say my husband was the first one that was like, oh, listen to this. We got to do this. And I was like, I don't know. So he took the reins and started the whole process of points and miles. I kind of jumped in and learned along the way. And then I would almost say that the roles have kind of reversed now. I am more deep in it than he is. He doesn't quite have as much time to, keep up with the latest news and what's going on. I mean, I'm always the one, like even just last week of the whole pays thing that came out. I was like, did you hear about this? And he was like, what are you talking about? So yeah, I would say I'm probably now the P1 and he's now the P2. But yeah, so we started just, 5 years ago or so. We got the Capital One Venture X card first. He got it first, then referred me. Then we quickly added the Chase Sapphire Preferred and Amex Platinum to our slew of cards, and then, just started collecting points across all the banks.
I absolutely love that. And I love that transition because you don't often hear of the P1 and P2 roles reversing. Usually the P1 is the one that's just like, oh yeah, we're doing this. And P2 is just kind of like along for the ride. Or the P2s are really strong, almost P1, but they're just like, I don't have time to deal with all this.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was like, oh, this, like their roles reversing, I think that's pretty unique and absolutely love that. And so what inspired you to plan Thailand and Singapore? Can you also remind the audience of how large is your family exactly?
Sure. We're a family of five, three kids. Our kids are ages 11, 9, and 5. So my husband and I have always loved traveling. We traveled as much as we could before kids. And then the first child came along and we kind of slowed down. And I would say part of that was because we weren't confident in traveling with kids, but also it was really expensive. So when we discovered Points and Miles, we were just so excited that we could, start getting back into traveling the way that we really aspired to do. So, yeah, the Thailand trip. So I'll back up and kind of explain. The other trips we did first, we started small with like a points trip to California, and then into the Caribbean a little bit, and then we've gone to Europe a handful of times with the kids, Spain and France and Greece and stuff. And so once we kind of learned that the kids could handle that really well, we had the confidence to try something bigger like Thailand. And Thailand had been on our bucket list for quite some time. One of those places that, we had just dreamed and didn't actually think it would be a true reality until just a couple of years ago when we realized we could actually make this happen. We just love Thai food, and then beautiful beaches and landscape there just really drew us in. So I read that December and January are like the best months to visit Thailand because of the weather. Like, it's not the rainy season, it's not insanely hot. And the best part is my kids are in year-round school. So they are actually off school in January, all the way almost till the end of January. So it was like the perfect time to just say, all right, well, we're going to do Thailand. We're going to get through the holidays and then just go on over to Thailand for a couple of weeks. And that covered our break then. So yeah, Singapore wasn't initially on the list as part of the trip. It was really Thailand. But then when we ended up getting our flights booked through Singapore and I started doing some research about Singapore and what we could do there, I was like, oh, this city looks really cool. We're going to have to stay here a few more days and check it out before we move on. So that's kind of how Singapore ended up getting added.
I absolutely love that. And for the long-term listeners of the show, you know that my wife and I, we spent 4 days in Singapore, had a blast. You've probably also heard me say multiple times, one of my favorite countries in the world and destinations I've ever been to was Thailand. And when my wife hears this, she's going to roll her eyes because I say it every single time someone mentions Thailand because I absolutely love it.
And she hasn't been.
She is exactly, she hasn't been.
Yep.
And so I'm pretty positive that's on our 2027 agenda because she's very much so tired of me mentioning how much I love Thailand. And it's the one country that she has not been to yet with me. So anyway, I digress. So with all of that being said, so you had an incredible trip. You decided, hey, after being able to see what it was like traveling with kids and doing some of these smaller, and I say smaller in quotes because, it's still a fantastic destination, probably had great experiences. You said, hey, we can do this longer haul travel. Now, I know when we were talking offline, you'd said that you spent nearly 2 years planning it. Can you share what the hardest parts of putting the trip together were? And I'm assuming it's because, like you said, you're a family of 5, so that means a lot more butts and seats have to be worked out.
Yeah, exactly. So there were a couple hard parts about planning it, but the first was when we started just talking about it. I told my husband, he's more of the flights person, I would say. I'm learning a lot more now than I used to, but for this trip, he was the one handling the flights mostly. And I said, let's try to do Thailand and whatnot. And he's given me, well, we can go from here to here to here to here to here to Thailand. And I was like, that's 5 flights. And no, we're not doing that. We're not putting these kids on 5 flights to get over there. So I said, if you can find it in 3 flights, then we can do this. But I don't think we can handle 5. Like, that just seemed like too much and too much time wasted and whatnot. So that was the first obstacle, was just figuring out how we could get into Thailand in 3 flights. And so we did that. We figured it out. We went from Raleigh to Seattle. That was a direct flight. We spent 1 night in Seattle and then flew from Seattle to Singapore, and then spent 4 days in Singapore before we ventured over to Thailand. So it was the perfect breakup of, not too much back-to-back flights in a row or anything like that. So yeah, that was the first obstacle, was just figuring out how to get there. And then, of course, finding 5 seats in business class. The ultimate goal was to go in business class. We were hoping we would have enough points to do both ways in business class. And thankfully, we were able to find, not only one flight that had all 5 of us together in business class, but also a return flight as well. And then just, all the time spent researching Thailand, figuring out how to put the puzzle together of which cities are we going to go to, how long are we going to spend at each one, what are we going to do there, all the hotels, like just the time, commitment to it. That was hard, but I wouldn't say much harder or different than any other trip planning.
Yeah, I absolutely get that. And one thing I want to ask you about, because I think this can be helpful for like a beginner who hears this and they may say, oh, I live in Raleigh as an example. I'd love to get to Thailand. How did you connect all of those legs? I can't find point availability from Raleigh direct to Thailand through a Singapore or Seattle. Can you mention the thought process there? Because I think that's really important, especially as more families are getting in the points a mile space, to recognize that booking a trip with points is going to be a lot different than booking a trip with cash.
Yeah. So we used is it Points Path? I can't remember our Points Connections. We used that one to kind of see what all the options were for airlines and stuff. And then we knew that situating ourselves in a West Coast hub airport would be the best. I wasn't so much worried. If we'd had to take a connection from like Raleigh to Texas and then over, we would have been okay with that. We just kind of got lucky that there was a direct from Raleigh to Seattle. Yeah, so we used to use point.me a lot, and then right around the time of booking this flight, we had switched over to seats.aero, and that is pretty much our go-to award flight search tool now because it's just broader. It, kind of pulls up all the different options. There's lots of filtering options, so you can filter for which banks you have that you can transfer to, and even down to like specific airlines and whatnot. So really easy tool to use. So we use that and set up alerts. And then I would also say, like, just knowing the award chart availability, like the windows for each airline that you're looking at and when they open up award seats, because business class in particularly fills up really quick. So you do need to know a year out or, just under a year out is typical for most airlines, but each airline varies. So you kind of got to look at them all individually.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you remember by chance, Gretchen, the flight from Raleigh to Seattle, did you guys pay cash for that flight or did you use points?
Yeah, we did end up using cash for that flight. Yeah.
And I think that's really important to point out because that's the part where people get a little bit lost in the sauce. And you use some really great tools. So you talked about seats.aero, great search tool, point.me, a little bit more basic, but can do good searches. It just takes a lot more work. But the key one I want to point out that you mentioned was flightconnections.com. And this is one of my favorite tools to use because of the fact that you can put in a destination like a Hong Kong or a Thailand or a Bali, or in my case right now, I've been all over that site looking at Buenos Aires, Argentina for some travel later this year. It will tell you all the ways to get into this one airport, and then you can use that to backtrack. So that's really, really smart thing that you and your husband did. And the fact that you found, this sounds like the points deal from Seattle to Thailand, but you still have to get to Seattle, right? So that positioning flight was a key component there as well. I assume then, was it Singapore Airlines you flew?
Correct. Yep. Singapore Airlines.
Awesome. What was the business class experience like? And was that your first time having 5 of you in business class to that degree?
It was the first time all 5 of us were in business class. My husband and I had flown business class to Europe, but not anywhere this far. And the kids had never done business class, so they were really excited. We had told them just maybe a month before the trip where we were going and what we were doing and what our seats were going to be like, and they were just pumped. So yeah, you've already talked a lot about on your podcast about the experience there, but I will agree with you. The one thing, particularly for the 5-year-old, the fact that the screen is not touchscreen, that was just kind of strange. And my little one couldn't really work the remote very well. So he needed a lot of help with that, where the touchscreen would have been much easier. So that was a little surprising, but everything else about the flight and the service was just incredible. People asked me afterwards, about the flight, and I was like, we didn't sleep 8 hours straight or anything on the plane, but it was a lot of just, eat, sleep, watch TV, repeat, for like 3 rounds basically. And we did feel really well rested when we got there. I would say that the flight over there in business class to Asia was easier than going to Europe. I know that's a strong opinion there, but you land and you're not just completely exhausted and wiped out like you are going to Europe when the flight's only 6 hours and you're supposed to get a full night's sleep in 6 hours and eat dinner and breakfast in that time too. So yeah, it was an incredible experience.
Absolutely love that. And you're right. Again, these are first world problems, but the longer haul flights, you get a lot more rest on than the shorter ones where you actually don't have time to like do all the things, experience the things, eat, and then sleep within a 6-hour window over the Atlantic. That's just why I know some people actually love backtracking if you're on the East Coast, backtracking to like Texas or Chicago, so you have a further distance to fly to go east towards Europe. So let me ask you this, Gretchen, with the experience and the travel, do you happen to know what the flight cost? Like, how many points did you guys end up using for 5 of you to get to Thailand versus like what that would have cost in cash, basically?
Yeah, I'll just give you the numbers for the Seattle to Singapore because we did end up using just cash for the inner Asia flights, basically from Singapore to Thailand and our country as well. And those were not very much. But anyway, Seattle to Singapore was 108,000 miles per person and $5.60 per person. So the cash price on that flight would have been $5,000. And that's just the one way would have been $5,000. And then it was very similar on our return flight. We flew Singapore to JFK in New York, and that was 106,000 miles per person, a little bit more on the fees. It was $66 in fees for each person. And those flights were just slightly less, 4,500 each.
Got it. So I'm doing some rough head math here. We're talking 100,000 points per person each way, family of 5. That's about 1 million points total we burned from a flight standpoint. Taxes and fees were, I'm going to round up and say you're probably maybe $150 in total in taxes and fees round trip. And then the cash price of that $5,000 per person, again, times 5 times 2, we're talking $50,000 is what just the flights alone would have cost for a family of 5. And you did it by utilizing 1 million points, which is absolutely incredible. But that also goes to show as well, family of 5, it takes a lot longer to get 1 million points than it does for my wife and I to get 200,000, or in this case 400,000 points for a round trip. The strategy wise, was it something that you guys had been building, banking up your points for a while with this goal in mind? Did you kind of rapidly grab the points that you needed for this strategy? A lot of people say, hey, it's really hard to get 5 seats in business class. So was this different booking? Can you talk through a little bit of that? And then, of course, we got to talk through what the actual trip experience was like.
Yeah, so like you said, it does take a while to accumulate that many points, but we are continuously trying to maximize our point multipliers. That's something that is all on me. My husband barely pays attention to it, but he sees how much, I'm using in the multipliers, and it's like, keep at it, keep at it. And then of course, we're always trying to almost always have like we're opening cards and trying to meet sign-on bonuses, and almost always have one of those going. And we try to diversify our points so that we have some in Chase and some in Capital One, some in Amex. We haven't ventured into Citi yet, but I think we're looking at the Citi Strata Premier now, so that might be coming soon. And then we have a couple of, hotel cards and airline cards as well, but not too many. And fortunately, Singapore Airlines accepts transfers from all 3 of those major banks. So that was really the key factor that made it so that we could, get there and back with the points that we had.
I love that. So before we go into talking about Thailand, what was experience like in Singapore? I know when my wife and I went, it was August. It was absolutely blazingly hot. In fact, when I went to Thailand, it was also August. So it was also insanely hot. So it sounds like you probably went for a good time from a temperature standpoint. So where did you stay, and what were some of the highlights there before you guys moved on? Because 4 days is a solid amount of time to spend in Singapore for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you say, and I remember you saying on your podcast how hot it was there in August, and we actually didn't feel like it was that hot. Now, this was January, but it didn't feel much different than what it is now, honestly, in North Carolina in the summertime. It felt pretty comparable. I would even say a little less humid than it currently is right now. So it was hot, yeah, but it was very manageable. So yeah, we did quite a few things in Singapore. We went over to Sentosa. bopped around there, went to the beach, the Palawan beach, I believe it is. And then we stumbled upon the southernmost point in Asia sign down on that beach, which was pretty cool. And we rode the cable car across the island and checked out the hawker station that was over there. This was all like on our first stop in Singapore. On our way back from Thailand, we flew back into Singapore for one night just to get to our positioning flight. And we came back to Sentosa and stayed out there again and at the W Hotel, which was really fancy. Probably the fanciest hotel my family's ever stayed at. So the kids absolutely loved it. So yeah, we spent some time in Sentosa. We went over to Marina Bay Sands and checked out that casino and hotel, walked over to Gardens by the Bay, went into the cloud forest. There was so much to do there for the kids. You could spend all day, if not a day or two, a couple days there in that Marina Bay Sands and Gardens by the Bay area with kids. They had a lot to offer. Splash pads for them, playgrounds, so much.
All the things.
So yeah, we did try to find. You had mentioned a hotel, I think it was, or a bar or something with espresso martinis over on, I think it was Sentosa. We tried to find it and we could not find it. But I was really hoping. I was like, we have to find this espresso martini bar because we love those as well, and never got to it.
Yeah, it was, I don't remember the name of the hotel, but there's giant teddy bears all in the lobby.
Yeah, that's what I looked up, and I don't know, maybe it's gone now. I don't know, but we'll just have to go back.
Yeah, maybe. I do know it was Jigger and Pony was one of the top bars in Asia, and it was like within walking distance of there. So we actually went there because we were like, oh, let's go to Sentosa Island. We heard such great things about it. And long story short, we didn't realize the whole island was going to be shut down just from like it being late. So we got to Sentosa, like the last monorail to take us to the island, and it was just completely dead with lights everywhere. So like we have videos of just us dancing to just lights. And then we go and we had heard music in the distance on some random hotel rooftop, followed the sound, and then ended up at some rooftop party, and then we had to figure out how to get back home. That was a whole other experience, but this is not about us. This is about you.
No, I love it.
So Singapore, you guys had a great time. I'm curious, when it comes to your stay there in Singapore, did you use points? Did you use Fine Hotel and Resorts credit? I'm going to guess that's what the W was, but maybe not. How did you kind of handle your stay there? Or did you just pay cash because they're not super expensive hotels?
No, in fact, my husband didn't even know this until I was writing up my notes for this, but we use some sort of points for every single hotel on this whole trip. And this is the first trip I've ever done that where I was able to utilize some sort of travel credit or points for every single thing. So in Singapore, we stayed at the Holiday Inn. There's lots of them there, but this was in Orchard City, I believe. And we used points. So we utilized the fourth night free on that. I can't remember the points off the top of my head. I want to say it was somewhere in the 27,000 per night range. So we had 4 nights there. And then the W was actually a Marriott free night certificate. And we don't even have we don't have the Ritz card. We have just the regular Marriott. So I think our limit on that was 45,000 per night, something like that. But it was a $500 night hotel. So yeah, it was a great redemption.
Hey everyone, quick break from the episode. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you're subscribed on whatever platform you're listening on so you never miss an episode. And if you've gotten any value so far, it would mean the world if you left a quick rating or review. It helps more people discover the show and keeps us motivated to keep creating great content. Also, if you're feeling stuck or want help with points and miles, whether it's picking your first card, planning a big redemption, or even having someone book it all for you, we've got you covered. There's a link in the show notes to schedule a free points and miles consultation. Just fill out a quick questionnaire, tell us your goals, and we'll take it from there. And don't forget, our newsletter and private Facebook group are great ways to stay on top of breaking news, updated card offers, and tips that don't always make it into the podcast. You'll find those links in the show notes as well. Now, back to the episode. I love that. And one thing to point out as well, I've mentioned this many times, but not many people I know have stayed there. How was the Holiday Inn? Because, of course, when you think of Holiday Inns here in the U.S., they're not really the place you think of staying after flying business class to Singapore or to Thailand. But one thing I've mentioned before is Holiday Inns outside the country, especially in Asia, are typically actually pretty nice. What was your experience with the Holiday Inn there?
It was great. It was nice. I think it's a 4-star. I would definitely rank it as a 4-star hotel. And you're exactly correct. You are one of the people that I was taking that advice from, of looking at these Holiday Inns in Asia, because again, I've also heard that they were exceptional over there, much nicer than the United States. So yeah, this was one of 2 Holiday Inns. We actually stayed at another Holiday Inn when we got over to Koh Samui. So yeah, I would definitely recommend Holiday Inns in Asia. They're great.
I absolutely love that, Gretchen. Well, we got to move on and talk about Thailand. So where did you guys go? You mentioned Koh Samui as one of the places. What was the experience like in Thailand? We've had Ben from Ben's Big Deal, who talked all about all these places in Thailand you can go on the show. And so we'll link that in the show notes for anyone that wants kind of a nice breakdown of someone that's actually Thai, who didn't point to miles. But I'd love to know kind of where did you decide to go with your family, and what was the thought process there? Because Thailand's a lot you can do, a lot you can see. How did you prioritize where to go, and where'd you end up going?
We ended up choosing to go to Krabi, is where we started our adventure. I had narrowed it down to Krabi and Phuket and had looked pretty heavily into both of them. And I just settled on Krabi. It seemed like it was going to be a little quieter and not quite so overrun by tourists as Phuket. While I've heard awesome things about Phuket, I would still go there, but Krabi just seemed like a better fit for us. So we chose Krabi. It was a bit crowded, but it was a great city. Everything's walkable. Every street is lined with restaurants and laundromats and massage parlors and 7-Elevens. There's 7-Elevens everywhere. So you could pretty much go up one street and it's going to be the same as the next street over and the next street over. The night markets were our favorite part. We pretty much ate dinner at the night markets every night because there was just such a great variety of food, just very unique things. It was very cheap, so you could try lots of stuff and, not break your budget or anything. There was something for everybody. Kids didn't have any trouble eating at the night markets. They actually didn't have trouble eating really anywhere. There was enough kids offerings. If you have picky eaters, there's enough American-like food on menus there that your kids will be fine. We let our kids sometimes have the chicken nugget or the burger. Those were more expensive. The Americanized food is definitely more expensive, but we really encouraged them to eat the local stuff, and they did. They enjoyed that too. So we also, from Krabi, we went over to Koh Samui, which is an island off the coast of Thailand. And then our final stop in Thailand was Chiang Mai. And we did about equal time at each place, 5 days. I think Chiang Mai was only 4, but Krabi and Koh Samui, we were there for 5 each. So enough time to get settled, learn the area we were in, do a few excursions, and then move to the next one. And they all brought a little bit different experience to the party. So that's kind of why we ended up not doing Bangkok, because we were doing Singapore. And I felt like, while yes, they would be very different, they were still like big cities. And so I wanted to just have the one big city and then focus on the smaller cities for the rest of the trip.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair assessment. You are right. They are very different in very different ways, actually. So I definitely think if you have opportunity to, I would experience some of Bangkok, even though you don't need to spend a lot of time there. A couple days, you'll have more than your fill. But definitely, I can understand wanting to take a break from the city, especially since you were going back to Singapore as well. And you went to Krabi and Chiang Mai. Both of those are places that I spent some time with as well. I never went to Koh Samui. I know that's been made really, really popular, of course, with the White Lotus. I think the most recent season of that, people were like, oh, Koh Samui has been added to as far as one of the places you can go. What destination do you feel like you love the most of the places that you guys went? And these are all going to be very, very different, right? So Krabi and Koh Samui are both kind of beachy, islandish. Obviously, Chiang Mai is in the interior, so that's a great place to bathe elephants in the river and hang out with monks and such, or whatever it may be. But what do you think kind of connected with you all and your family the most?
My family, I would say Koh Samui was the best fit. Krabi was very, very close runner-up, but Koh Samui, it could have been just the hotel that we chose and our location there. But we were, like I said before, we were at another Holiday Inn in Koh Samui, and this one I had found recommended from a blog that I had found from a family that had traveled to Thailand, and they sold me on it. And so we booked that hotel. It was super, super kid-friendly. There was a kids club. There was activities every night for the kids. And it was right on the beach. It was right there in Fisherman's Village, which is a really great area, right on the water and full of restaurants and everything else. So, and just really nice. So I think that was probably our favorite, but it wasn't super, super different from Krabi, I would say. Chiang Mai, like you said, is definitely more inland and city feel, although it was a small city, so everything was super walkable, which we loved. Just because it was city, it didn't feel like it was Singapore or anything massive like that. So I did like the small city feel of Chiang Mai. And like you said, the elephants there was one of the excursions we did, and hands down our family's favorite thing we did. We did elephants and we did a cooking class in Chiang Mai. And when I asked my family what their favorite thing of the whole trip was, everybody said that's what they loved the most. So great experiences in Chiang Mai, but of course, the beaches and the water and the pools and everything else in the other cities were a big plus too.
Yeah, it's hard to differentiate between both those because they're so different. I mean, you see incredible water, crystal clear water. The formations of the rocks and the islands down there are incredible, but then the cultural appeal and some of the things you can do, especially when you find those super reputable, animal handling areas. Like when I went, I was able to hang out at like a retirement home basically for elephants that were like retired field workers. So they were there until they, basically till they died, right? Like it was like their retirement home. Like those are really cool experiences that you can get to have. So I really love the fact that your family got to get all those different angles of them all put together. I know you mentioned you stayed at a Holiday Inn in Koh Samui. For Krabi and Chiang Mai, you said that you'd use points deals as well. Do you remember exactly what you had booked and kind of, not necessarily the value you got out of it, but specifically, were these free night certificates? Were these just points deals, transfer points or through travel portals? How'd you end up finding those or at least booking them?
Yeah, so the Holiday Inn in Koh Samui was also a redemption with my IHG One Premier card. And once we had booked the flights for the trip, I went ahead and got that IHG Premier card because I knew I was going to do a couple Holiday Inns. We were over there. I can't remember the exact sign up bonus. I want to say it was like 175. It's similar to what it normally is, but I think it was the elevated slightly. So 175, 185, something like that. And so I got that card and was able to do in Koh Samui. We did the 4 nights or the 4th night free. We ended up staying 5 nights, but we got one of those nights free by using points to book the stay. So that was with that card, the IHG card. And then in Krabi, I believe I booked it. Yeah, I booked it through Capital One Travel and used the $300 Capital One Venture X yearly credit for that hotel. And Chiang Mai, I did not use any points play on, I don't believe. That might have been the only one I did not. Yeah, but it was extremely cheap. It was like, I think, $500 for 4 nights, and it included breakfast, and it was really nice. It was like a boutique hotel, but it was decorated very Thai-like, if that makes sense, and just had lots of little details throughout that were really cool and unique. A great way to round out our trip.
I think that's a really great point because I know a lot of times when we're in the points and miles world, we get so like tunnel vision to like having to stay at places that allow us to use our points or allow us to use our fine hotels and resorts credits or whatever it may be. But there's a lot of incredible properties out there that you can't book through the travel hacking methods, really. It's where it comes down to you got to pay cash, but you can pay cash at some incredible places or places that are very inexpensive or a mixture of both. I think when I stayed in Bangkok, I paid $94 a night for like the number 2 hotel in Bangkok on like TripAdvisor or whatever it may be, right? And it was a fantastic 5-star hotel right in the middle of the city. So I love the fact that although it'd be great to say, yes, all of our stays were covered with points, the fact that you did have a 4 or 5 night stay and it cost you $500 for 5 of you, including breakfast, is absolutely huge. And what I always, as you know, love mentioning on the show is that what Points and Miles allows us to do is to expand what we can do with our budget, because now we're spending less on the airfare or less on the hotels. So we have room to do some of these other little things as well, which I absolutely love that you had a nice little spread of how you did the trip overall. So Gretchen, I know when talking through all these different things, right, like you had this amazing experience in Singapore, amazing experience in Thailand. I'm really curious for the parents out there that have kids, they're a little concerned about the logistics of a trip this big, right? Multiple positioning flights, multiple stops. How did you balance the go, go, go with the like, okay, time to rest and recover. And I imagine helping 3 kids pack while you're packing yourself up in these different destinations. Can you talk a little bit through like the on the ground experience as a parent in this realm?
Yeah. Well, the first thing we did was I strategically spread out our travel days and flights and stuff. So we never took more than one flight per day until the very, very last day of the trip. But that was fine. But moving even from Raleigh to Seattle, we spent a night there. And then Seattle to Singapore, we spent 4 nights. So we really played the moving pieces slowly. And I think that helped because once we got to Asia, we never lost a full day of just because we were traveling. We would travel for, a few hours in the morning or in the afternoon and then still have plenty of time to do other stuff when we got there. And it just kept everybody from getting like too wiped out and tired and cranky and everything from just long days of travel. So that helped a ton. And then I also just spread out the excursions that we did. We'd land in a city and I'd give us that first full day to just explore the city, get to know it, figure out what we wanted to do and just be spontaneous. And then, maybe that second day we were there is when I would book an excursion for us. And then the next day after that, we'd have like a little bit of a break to do something else. And yeah, so just kind of spreading everything out. And, this was a vacation too. So while I have 3 kids that are energetic and, busy and everything, we found a good balance by having, I think we did 5 or 6 excursions throughout this trip, but we were gone for 3 weeks. So spread out over 3 weeks, it didn't feel that jam packed. And we still had lots of time just to relax and rest and enjoy our time there.
And I'm curious, did you run into any issues like a lot of families of 5 or more have in Europe and other places where rooms are really restricted to no more than 4? Did you run into any of that with any places that you stayed, or did you get suites or anything like that to kind of accommodate for that?
We didn't. And I would say they were extremely laid back about all that. So just for instance, when we got to Singapore, I had booked a standard room for 4 people. I didn't even have 5 people on the reservation. And when we checked in, they offered us a suite upgrade. And I said, okay, well, what's the suite like? And they said, well, it's a king bed and then a living room with a couch. And I said, is the couch a fold out couch? And they said, no. And I was like, okay, well, we have 3 kids. How are we going to do this? And I was like, well, we'll go up and take a look. And they didn't have a rollaway bed. We asked for that too. And they said they didn't have a rollaway bed or they wouldn't do it in the suite. I don't know, something like that. So that wasn't an option. So we went up there and we just kind of looked at it and we're like, well, this is a lot of space, 2 rooms, 1.5 baths. We had an extra half bath, which was nice. And so we were like, well, how can we get creative like this? So we put my son on the couch. We took the cushions off the back of the couch and put them on the floor for my daughter to sleep on. And then our youngest 5-year-old, he slept on like a built-in luggage rack that it had like a cushion on it, but it was not very long. It was maybe like 2.5 feet long. And he slept on that for 4 nights and he was perfectly fine. So yeah, they didn't care that we were in a king suite with, I don't even know what the occupancy on that suite would have been. It's probably just 2 people, I would guess, because there was only 1 bed. But yeah, they were totally fine with it. And then the rest of the hotels, we didn't have to do anything that crazy for the rest of the hotels. But yeah, I think there was only one place in Krabi we ended up booking 2 rooms because there just was kind of no way we could get all 5 of us in one. But the other 2 places, they just put a rollaway in the room for us and we were fine. And they weren't really checking either. Like in Europe, they are taking your passport. They did take all our passports, but they never said, okay, the max occupancy on this room is 4 and you have 5, so this is not going to work. We never had any issues with that. Where in Europe, we've had some issues in Europe before so now I know whenever I go to Europe, I make sure to email the hotel first if I'm trying to squeeze us into a 1-bedroom there. But Asia, no, they didn't really care.
Got it. Well, I love the creativity that you guys explored to enjoy that suite a little bit more, which is awesome. Gretchen, before we wrap this one up, I've got to ask you about a story or experience, I should say, that I know you had that is probably more of a public service announcement, honestly, for the listeners, because I know this was something that I had never heard of when we talked a little bit offline, and it's about a scam that you guys experienced when it came to booking the Singapore Airlines flight, I believe. So can you talk through what kind of unknowingly happened here? Because I think this is going to be huge for the listeners to hear about and know that exists, because this was something that I had never heard of myself.
Yeah, so we were pretty shocked as well when this all went down. But we had found the flights that we wanted to book on Singapore Airlines, and this was the end of February 2025. And we went to, but we knew we had to get all of our points transferred over there first. So my husband had read that they will put your flight on hold for you to allow time for the points to move over. So he was just kind of looking into that to figure out exactly what was going to be needed in order to do that. So he's on Reddit, which I don't actually get on there very much, so I don't even know how it works, but he had found a thread in Reddit with somebody that had posted instructions for putting on hold the long haul flights. And within this thread, somebody had said, "Oh, yes, they will absolutely do this for you. Here's their customer service number. Just call them and they'll put them on hold, whatever." So we did that. We called and put the flights on hold. We talked to a person named Tyler, and he assisted us with putting the flights on hold. We could see it all in our Singapore Airlines app at that point. And so once all the points were moved over, he said, "Just call me back and I will, issue your ticket and whatnot." So we did that. And we did this for both of our flights. We did it for the flight there and the flight back. And he informed us when we were in the booking process that there was going to be two separate charges on our credit card. And one was going to be, and they were all going to be for like taxes and fuel fees and whatnot. So one of the charges was going to be for $5.60 per person. And the other charge was going to be for $510 per person. And that was the same pretty much for both there and back. So we're like, okay. So we paid the fees, flights were booked, and then we just moved on to planning the rest of our trip from there. So that happened. And then about 7 weeks later or so, I had continued to listen to podcasts, and I kept hearing that Singapore Airlines is so great because it's only $5.60 for award flights. And I was like, well, we paid so much more than that. And at the time, I had to look it up, but I was like, I know we had two different fees, but the math, because it was times 5, I wasn't completely making sense of it. And then finally, after like the third person that I heard in a matter of a couple weeks there, I said something to my husband. I said, why did we pay so much? Because ultimately we ended up spending about $5,000 in the taxes and fees for both flights there and back. And so my husband started researching into it, and he came to me because I had to tell him a few times. I was like, but something seems off to me. Like, can you look into this? And so he did. And he was like, I think we got scammed. He's like, I don't think that was Singapore Airlines that we were talking to. And I was like, well, what do you mean? How can that be? And so we started investigating. We dug into it, and it turns out, it was not Singapore Airlines. It was a company posing to be Singapore Airlines.
Wow. I got so many thoughts running through my head right now. So $5.60, and they mentioned a separate fee, $500 charge. Now, I know you guys haven't been into points and miles too long, so you would have booked this is 2025, you said. So was it something that you just, because using the different tools out there, I think you said you used Seats Arrow to plan this. Were you thinking that the fees were just larger than you had seen online, or are you just kind of moving through the process so quickly? He's like, oh, it's going to be this. You just kind of say yay and you moved on. I know that you said that eventually when you kind of heard people say the fees were so low that it clicked, but I'm curious as to, usually the numbers don't typically, connect like that or disconnect like that where it's so dramatic from a difference. Was there any inclination before you were hearing that this might be a little bit off, or just, hey, you guys are busy, you just moved along with your day and kept rolling?
I think a little bit of all of that. Yeah. I think we were so excited that we were actually making this booking that we kind of skipped over that part. Also, this was our first time flying to Asia, and it's a really long flight, 16 hours, 18 hours on the way back. And we were like, well, I'm sure gas, it really is very expensive for this plane. So sure, I guess it's legit. And then, we've looked at business class flights to Europe, and depending on the airline, $500 is reasonable for fees and taxes to go to Europe. So it didn't seem that alarming going to Asia at the time initially.
Absolutely can understand that. I mean, flying into Heathrow, you're likely hitting $500 easily per person. So I completely get that. Well, I got to ask, Gretchen, I mean, so it clicked, you realized, oh man, we just got scammed. What did you do next?
We reached right back out to the Tyler guy, and we asked for a copy of our receipt from him, which he took him a couple days to get it to us. And then once we received it, we could tell that it was completely fabricated. Like it didn't have the right titles and all. It didn't look anything like what Singapore Airlines gave us, because we did reach out to them too. They also gave us their receipt, and their receipt said $5.60 is all they charged us. So we let Singapore Airlines know what was going on, like what we were suspicious of. And they said that they had issues with companies like this. And so they wanted, they wanted us to give them all the info we had, all the documentation we had from Tyler throughout the process. And so we gave that all to them. And then we did the same thing with Amex. We reached out to Amex, we used our Amex Platinum cards to book the flights. And so they were so wonderful. They just collected the information. They asked us to do a few things like reach out to Tyler, say this, this, and this, and then give them some time. If you don't get a response, reach out again. And so we followed everything they asked us to do. They walked us through opening up a fraud ticket. And eventually, not eventually, it was pretty quick, actually, just a couple weeks. Then they were like, okay, we're going to refund you all of the money that they stole from us, basically, which was $5,000. So Amex refunded it.
That's absolutely incredible. I'm really curious, and that's not something that I think you would know this, but I'm just talking out loud. And for the listeners, I'm curious what the listeners would think as well. I always book my flights, even my taxes and fees, with my Chase Sapphire Reserve because of the better travel protections. However, I do firmly believe Amex has a much better concierge and when things go wrong, we'll fix it department basically. And so while every credit card has their anti-fraud systems in place, which is usually for when someone steals from you or steals your credit card and starts charging random things without you knowing, I'm really curious, would this experience have been the same if you had used any other card but the Amex Platinum, or maybe an Amex card in general? But I'm thinking the Amex Platinum card, because of their level of customer service, is one of the things that has separated them over the years versus pretty much every other card company. So I know you probably don't have the answer to that, but I'm just thinking out loud that using the Amex Platinum for these flights possibly saved you on this fraud attempt.
Yeah, I think so too. And like you said, they were tremendous. They did their own investigation, or Singapore Airlines did their own investigation as well, as did Amex. So yeah, they took charge, and they were just so easy and awesome to work with. We have always put our flights on Amex Platinum because that's all we have had until just a few weeks ago when I opened up the Chase Sapphire Reserve. So I've even thought myself of moving forward, because I've heard about how great the protections are with the Reserve. So moving forward, do I go with the Chase Reserve now for flights, or do I continue with Amex? Like you said, there's probably pros and cons to both of them, but both cards are definitely great cards to have for travel protections.
Absolutely. And purchase protections and all the things. I think I would definitely say when it comes to purchase protections, if you're buying expensive equipment or TV or whatever it may be, although you're not going to get the best multiplier, the Amex Platinum is great for those things, for stuff that gets broken or lost or whatever it may be. But travel across the board, Chase is where you want to go for what they will cover, the amount they'll cover versus Amex. Which this isn't a conversation on travel insurance. I'm actually going to be having a podcast episode to talk all about that in the future. But I will definitely say the Chase card is the way to go. Gretchen, this has been a fantastic episode. It's been very unique conversation because we talked through not just booking 5 business class seats to Thailand, but a little bit of the experience along the way, the thought process, how you did it, all of those different things. Anything else you can think of when it comes to, this trip outside of obviously not booking with Tyler? Would you do anything differently if you were to plan this trip again?
Honestly, we would do the same trip again. We wouldn't change anything. But we were so happy with how it all played out, and we didn't have any logistical issues. I was prepared for something to happen, but 3 weeks and so many moving parts. I mean, we had 7 flights and 6 hotels, and we didn't even have bad weather. We had 1 day of rain, but it was not on a day that we had an excursion or anything. So it was perfect. So I would do this trip again exactly how it was. We hope to go back to each of these cities. The one thing I will say is my husband and I agreed that while Chiang Mai held our favorite excursions, the elephants and the cooking class, if we go back to Chiang Mai, I think we would do it without the kids, because there was so much more in that city. There's a whole nightlife scene that we could hear, but we couldn't be a part of. And there wasn't a whole ton to do in the city. I mean, the temples were amazing and great to, walk by and go in some of them and whatnot. But like the kids just didn't have a ton in the city to do. So that would be the only thing. Like I said, I would still do our exact trip again, but like for next time, maybe skip Chiang Mai with the kids.
I love that because as you were saying that, I'm like having like flashbacks in my mind of I won't lie, I partied my face off in Thailand, in Chiang Mai, and in Bangkok. Some of the most fun, crazy. There's absolutely incredible. So yes, you could absolutely hear the parties and the nightlife going, and that's part of the reasons why there's such incredible destinations. And I got a bucket of rum or like a mini bucket of like rum and Coke, and it was like $4 US. I was like, I'm in heaven.
Oh yeah. I think Chiang Mai was the cheapest place of all three that we went to. It was, just unbelievable.
It was fantastic. Well, let me ask you this, Gretchen. One of the last questions here before we wrap up. For the parents who assume a trip like this is impossible for a family of 5 or 4 or 6 or whatever it may be, and I know I've had many guests on the show who have said that it's very, very possible. But I want to hear, what would you say to parents who would assume like this is too difficult to do, or flying business class is too difficult for all, like it's too many points, it's too many X or Y or Z? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say that lots of families travel with 3 kids or more all the time. So, you're not going to be the only one out there. And you're going to get on a plane and realize that there's lots of families on here with kids. And for example, the flight to Singapore, we were in business class and there was a family of 5 behind us with 3 kids smaller than our kids. And I saw them come through and I was like, oh man, if they can do this, we can totally do this. So yeah, I would also say like the more you travel with kids, the easier it gets. So the kids learn how to travel. They learn to know what to expect. They learn to behave well most of the time. And you just got to do it. You just got to start small. Start with, domestic trips and then move into the Caribbean or Europe and move on to the bigger things. And the other thing that I like always try to remind myself is if your kids act up or misbehave, the good news is you'll likely never see these people that you're surrounded by again. So who cares? I don't let that stuff stop me.
I absolutely love that. That's also a great motto on cruise lines when they're like, oh, if the dance competition that they're starting on the Lido deck, like, hey, you're never going to see these people ever again. So just act a fool.
Exactly. Karaoke, just get out there.
Exactly. This has been great, Gretchen. Thank you for, such wealth of knowledge and information today and talking through like this family experience for Points and Miles. I know you had the blog post. We're going to link to that in the show notes because it is an incredible post where you break down all the places you stayed, everything that you guys did. You have pictures of you and the family. So I do encourage the listeners to go check out that post as well. But outside of that, how can the listeners connect with you?
Well, I'm not on social media anymore, but I do love talking Points and Miles. So I am happy to, connect. You can reach out to me via my email address, which you can put in the show notes as well. It's just gretchen.navy@gmail.com. And then I'm also in your BoldlyGo WhatsApp community chat, so you can find me there too.
Awesome. And I highly encourage listeners to join our WhatsApp community chat. It's a great community, great people that all love talking Points and Miles. And I know we are a very talkative bunch, so I'm sure many people have them chat on mute every so often because we love talking so much. But if you want a really fun, healthy place to ask your questions and learn more about Points and Miles, I can't encourage you enough to join that group. It is completely free to join as well. Gretchen, last couple of questions. I know you're listening to the show, so you know that these questions are coming. The first question is, who else should we have next on the show? Or I'll make a change to this. Or what else would you like to hear on the show in the future?
Well, because I am a mom and travel mostly with the family, my husband and I do get to venture out a couple of times a year for solo trips, but the bulk of it is certainly family related. So I think you had mentioned before that, a lot of your listeners have families that travel. So yeah, maybe some more destinational, kind of like what we did today, a family that has gone to, I don't even know where, let's say Africa or something, and just kind of walk through that because I learned so much of what drives me to a destination is through podcasts. Like I said, I'm not on social media, so most of the content that I absorb is via my ears. So I love the podcasts. And the next person I'm going to suggest you have on the show is a recent podcast I found called Travel Party of Five. And their hosts are Rhea and Duane. And they recently took their family of five to Thailand as well. But they've also done lots of other international travel on points. And they go pretty deep into their travels and then other things outside of that of how they're earning their points. And they get creative with their stuff. So they would be, I think, be a good contribute to your portfolio.
I have not heard of them, so I'm curious to seek them out and see if we can get them on a show, or maybe even do some sort of swap or something like that. So I appreciate you mentioning them. That's I always love hearing of a new creator that I haven't heard of before. Gretchen, this has been fantastic. Any final thoughts from you at all before we wrap this one up?
I would just say, don't wait until your kids are the perfect age to start traveling. I know a lot of people that holds them back, but the sooner you start, the more exploring you'll get to do and the more memories, and you won't regret it. So yeah, just get out there and do it.
Get out there, experience it. Gretchen, you and your family, you are living the motto of BoldlyGo, which is travel well, live boldly, right? You guys are doing some really incredible things as a family. You're using points and miles to help you fuel that. You are creating incredible experiences for your kids who are truly going to remember these opportunities for the rest of their lives. And I think that is just such an incredible thing that you guys are absolutely doing. So thank you again for being on the show today, for sharing your story of, with you and your husband, your journey and points and miles, and how you were able to put together such an incredible trip to Singapore and Thailand.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Absolutely. For listeners out there, if you want to connect with Gretchen, be sure to be in our WhatsApp community chat. No, Gretchen is always throwing comments and suggestions and other things in the chat, so you can absolutely connect with her there. And if you enjoyed this episode as well, make sure to connect with us on all the social media channels. Make sure to like, subscribe, sign up for our newsletter, our private Facebook group. If you're wondering how to even get into our WhatsApp community chat, well, the link is in our private Facebook group or by signing up for our newsletter as well. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your families. If you want to travel more, find that travel partner, you want to figure out how to go some pretty cool places, tell them as well. And as always, we will catch you on the next episode. Take care.